My name is Taryn Cole. I'm 27, and I learned the hard way that in some families, love comes with fine print. That night, I walked into a birthday dinner thinking I could survive one more small joke, one more forced smile, one more round of pretending we were normal. The restaurant was the kind of place where the lighting makes everyone look softer than they really are, where the wine glasses are so thin you feel like you're holding something fragile on purpose. I wore a red dress because I wanted to feel confident for once, not invisible. I should have known that confidence would be taken as an invitation. My sister stood up with her glass like she was about to make a sweet toast, the kind people record for their stories. Her eyes flicked to me first, and I felt it in my stomach before she even spoke. She smiled at the table and said, "Cheers to our real family," then paused just long enough for everyone to lean in, except the girl in the red dress. She's just adopted. The laughter wasn't loud, but it was sharp. Every head turned, every smile waited to see if I'd crack. I didn't. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I kept eating like my dignity wasn't up for discussion, like her words couldn't reach me. That was the part she didn't understand. I wasn't staying quiet because I was weak. I was staying quiet because I was deciding. When the plates were cleared and everyone started standing, she slid something across the table with a little grin that made my skin go cold. The bill, $2,800. She tilted her head and said, "Pay for it as my gift." And in that moment, I realized she didn't just want to embarrass me, she wanted to own me in front of everyone. I looked at the total, then back at her, and I said one sentence, calm and low, the kind of sentence you can't take back once it's spoken. Her smile dropped instantly. Her face went still. And the room, for the first time all night, didn't feel like it belonged to her anymore. If you've ever been treated like you should be grateful just to be tolerated, you'll understand why I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. That one sentence was the beginning of the gift I gave her, and she had no idea what it was going to cost. Before we go any further, make sure you follow if you want stories where karma doesn't just knock, it walks in and sits down. The waiter came back with that polite, practiced smile people use when they can sense tension but don't want to get involved. He didn't say anything at first, just stood near the edge of the table with the little card reader in his hand, waiting for someone to act like an adult. My sister kept her gaze on me, relaxed in her seat like she had already won. She had set the stage perfectly. Nice restaurant, plenty of witnesses, and a check big enough to make me look either broke or obedient. I didn't rush. I didn't fumble for my wallet. I slid the bill back toward her, not dramatically, just enough to make my point without making a scene. Then I looked up at the waiter and said, "Can you check whose name the reservation is under?" My sister's eyes narrowed for half a second, like she was calculating whether she could still spin this into a joke. The waiter nodded and stepped away to the host stand. When he returned, his tone was still friendly, but firm. "The reservation is under Vanessa Cole," he said, and then, because he'd clearly dealt with this kind of nonsense before, he added, "We typically process payment through the person who booked the table." Vanessa's smile twitched. She glanced around the table looking for backup, for someone to laugh and save her pride. But nobody moved. Her friends suddenly became fascinated with their phones. My parents stared at the centerpiece like it might start talking. Vanessa tried to recover fast. "Fine," she said, a little too loud as she reached for her purse. I was testing her. You know how sensitive she gets. The word sensitive was aimed at me like an insult wrapped in humor. I didn't bite. I just watched her tap her card, watched the reader beep, watched the waiter thank her like nothing had happened. It was such a small victory on paper, but I could feel the shift. For once, she had been forced to pay for the moment she created, Outside the restaurant, the cold Chicago air hit my face, and I breathed like I'd been holding my lungs hostage all night. Vanessa walked out behind me, heels clicking fast, anger slipping through her perfect posture. "You really embarrassed me," she hissed, low enough that our parents wouldn't hear. "You made me look cheap." I looked at her and said, "You did that all by yourself." Her jaw tightened, and for a second I thought she might actually say, "Sorry." Instead, she turned toward our parents with a different face, the wounded one, the one that always worked. "Mom," she said, voice suddenly soft, "did you hear how she talked to me?" My mother didn't even hesitate. She grabbed my arm near the sidewalk, not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough to remind me who she thought I belonged to. "Why do you have to make everything difficult?" she snapped. Tonight was Vanessa's birthday. You couldn't just do one nice thing. I stared at her hand on my arm and felt something inside me go quiet. My dad stood there, shoulders stiff, eyes avoiding mine the way they always did when choosing a side without saying it. "You know how your sister is," he murmured, like that sentence erased everything. I pulled my arm free and said, "And you know how I am. I'm done." I got into my car and drove home, and the whole way my phone kept lighting up with messages I didn't open. By the time I parked, I already knew what was coming next. They weren't upset that she called me adopted. They were upset that, for once, I didn't pay for it. The next few days were quiet in the way a storm is quiet when it's still far out at sea. Nobody apologized. Nobody asked if I was okay. Instead, my sister posted photos from the dinner like it had been perfect. Smiling group shots, fancy plates, candles, and then a close-up of her birthday cake with the caption, "Best night with my real people." No tag, no mention of me, just a clean little rewrite of reality, like I had never existed at her table at all. I should have been used to it, but that night did something new. It didn't just hurt, it clarified. 2 weeks later, my parents invited me to a Saturday picnic at our usual park in the suburbs. It was the kind of day families in America treat like a tradition. Folding chairs, a cooler full of sodas, hot dogs on a portable grill, and my dad pretending he was in charge of the tongs. I almost didn't go, but a part of me still wanted proof that I wasn't crazy, that maybe they could behave like a family for once. I arrived and instantly felt the same old setup. My sister was already there, laughing too loudly, telling a story where she was the hero. When she saw me, she scanned me like she was checking whether I deserved to be in the frame. "Oh, look," she said, sweet as syrup. She showed up. Our little chosen one. A couple of people laughed, the kind of laugh that isn't really funny but joins in anyway. Then came the photos. Vanessa made a big deal out of getting the perfect group shot for Instagram. She positioned everyone like props, pulled my mother closer, made sure my dad stood behind her shoulder, then angled her phone toward the sun. "Scoot in," she said, and when I stepped forward, she shifted slightly so I ended up half blocked behind someone's arm. When she posted it later, I wasn't even surprised. My face was cropped out like an accident. Her caption read, "Family is everything." My mother liked it within seconds. That was the moment I stopped hoping. A week after that, Vanessa hosted another celebration, this time on a rooftop downtown. All city lights and expensive cocktails. She called it a toast for her new project, her big next step. I went because I wanted to see it with my own eyes, because sometimes you need to witness the pattern one last time to stop denying it. Halfway through the night, Vanessa clinked her glass and thanked everyone for believing in her. Then she turned toward our parents and said, "And of course, none of this would be possible without Mom and Dad. Thank you for investing $30,000 in me. You've always supported the people who actually have potential." The word actually landed like a slap. People nodded like this was inspiring. My parents smiled proudly like they had just bought a front row seat to her greatness. I felt my heartbeat steady instead of spike, like my body had finally learned there was no point fighting for air in a room that didn't want me breathing. I set my drink down, looked at Vanessa, and asked calmly, "Is that an investment, or is that money you never plan to pay back?" The rooftop went quiet in a way that made every sound sharper. Vanessa's eyes widened, then she laughed too quickly. "Wow," she said, loud enough for everyone. "See what I mean? She's always dramatic, always jealous." My mother's face tightened. My dad's jaw worked like he was chewing on words he refused to say. Vanessa leaned closer and whispered, "Don't do this here. You don't get to ruin my night." I looked at her and said, "You ruined it the moment you decided I wasn't family." Then I walked out. In the elevator down, my phone started buzzing. Mom, Dad, Vanessa. Over and over. I didn't answer. When I got home, I blocked Vanessa's number, then my mother's, then my father's. My hands didn't shake. My chest didn't ache. I just felt this clean, empty space open up inside me, like I had finally stepped out of a room that had been slowly poisoning me for years. And that's when the real shift began, because the moment I disappeared, Vanessa stopped performing. She started kneading. For the first time in my life, silence felt expensive in a good way. My mornings were mine. No guilt texts, no passive-aggressive group chats, no last-minute demands disguised as family plans. I threw myself into work, and it surprised me how quickly my brain stopped bracing for impact. I worked in cybersecurity, the kind of job where patterns matter and small inconsistencies always lead to bigger truths if you stare long enough. I didn't tell anyone at my office what happened. I didn't need sympathy. I needed distance. I started running again after work, not to punish myself, but to feel strong in my own body. I cleaned out my apartment like I was clearing out old air. I even changed my emergency contact, and the fact that it hurt was proof it was necessary. Weeks passed, then a month. My sister stayed blocked. My parents stayed blocked. I expected relief, and I got it, but there was also this strange new feeling underneath it, like a quiet confidence I'd never earned before. I wasn't waiting to be chosen anymore. I was choosing myself. One afternoon, I got a message from my cousin Sasha. We weren't close when we were kids, but she was the one relative who always looked uncomfortable when Vanessa made her little jokes. The text was simple. "Are you okay?" I didn't answer right away. Part of me didn't want to open any door back into that world. But Sasha followed up with a second message that made my stomach drop. "Vanessa is telling people you abandoned the family, and Mom and Dad are stressed. Like really stressed." I called Sasha that night. She didn't waste time. She told me Vanessa's new project wasn't doing well. Vendors were complaining about late payments. A photographer she hired had threatened to take her to court. And the biggest detail, the one that felt like a pin sliding into the balloon of Vanessa's perfect image, was this. Vanessa had been bragging behind the scenes that family money was basically unlimited. She had told people our parents would always cover her, no matter what. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I felt that cold, familiar dread, because I knew exactly what that meant. If she was desperate, she wasn't just spending her own money, she was spending theirs. And if she was spending theirs, there was no way she was doing it cleanly. I didn't go digging because I wanted revenge. I went digging because I couldn't stand the idea of my parents losing everything to keep Vanessa looking successful. So I did what I always do when something feels off. I checked what's public. I looked up business filings. I searched civil court records. I scanned for liens and claims the way other people scroll social media. It didn't take long to find smoke. Vanessa's agency had a shiny name and a clean website, but the paper trail was messy. There were vendor disputes popping up. A notice that looked like a demand for payment. A financing statement that told me someone had put a claim on her business assets. Nothing screamed guilty on its own. But together, it was the same pattern I'd seen 100 times in my job. When someone's image is spotless but their numbers are frantic, The story is always the same. They're keeping the lights on with borrowed time. Over the next week, I didn't message my parents. I didn't unblock anyone. I just watched. And then, out of nowhere, an email hit my inbox from a sender I hadn't seen in months. Vanessa. Subject line. Can we talk like adults? It was polite. Too polite. No jokes, no insults, no adopted comments. Just a few lines about missing me, about wanting to move forward, about how she had an opportunity that could be good for both of us. I stared at the screen and felt a slow smile form, not because I was happy, but because I finally understood. She wasn't reaching out because she cared. She was reaching out because she needed something. And whatever she needed, she was running out of options. I didn't reply right away. I let the email sit there for a full day, not as a power move, but because I wanted to hear my own thoughts before her voice crawled back into my head. Then I responded with one sentence that was professional and clean. Sure, send over the details. Her answer came fast, like she'd been hovering over her phone waiting. She wrote like we were co-workers, not sisters, talking about synergy and growth and how she had a big client pipeline and just needed help tightening security and branding systems. She attached a folder of documents and called it a partnership packet, like putting a nice label on it would make it less desperate. I opened it and immediately felt that familiar click in my brain, the one that happens when something doesn't match. The pitch deck was glossy, full of photos of smiling models and promises about premium clients. But the numbers underneath were ugly. Invoices overdue. Vendor balances stacked like a leaning tower. A spreadsheet with line items that weren't business expenses at all. Weekend resort charges. Designer shopping. Flights that had nothing to do with client work. And the worst part wasn't even the spending. It was how casually it was mixed in, like her business account was just another purse. I sat back in my chair and breathed out slowly. This wasn't a rough patch. This was a collapse in slow motion. If I attached myself to it, I wouldn't just be helping her. I'd be volunteering to get dragged under with her. Vanessa suggested we meet in person. She picked a Starbucks downtown, of course, because it was public enough for her to feel safe and casual enough for her to pretend she wasn't begging. When I walked in, she looked up like she'd rehearsed the expression, warm and relieved, like we were about to hug and laugh about everything. She stood and opened her arms slightly. I didn't move. I sat down, placed my bag beside me, and kept my tone neutral. So tell me what you actually need. Her smile tightened, but she recovered. I need you on my side, she said, and then she softened her voice. Look, I know things got weird. I didn't mean what I said at the dinner. It was just a joke. People were laughing. You always take things personally. There it was. The same old pattern dressed up as reconciliation. I didn't argue with it. I just stared at her until she shifted in her seat. Okay, she rushed. Maybe it was harsh. But you have to admit you came at me too. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. I let that hang for a second. Then I opened my laptop and turned it slightly so she could see the spreadsheet she sent me. Vanessa, I said, calm enough to make her uncomfortable. Your problem isn't me. It's this. She glanced at the screen and her face flickered. Just a tiny crack in the mask. That's out of context, she said quickly. Those are temporary. I'm scaling. That's what entrepreneurs do. I pointed to a line item without touching the keyboard. Is a weekend resort temporary too? Or the designer charges? Are those clients? She swallowed and laughed, a little too sharp. Don't be dramatic. Then she leaned in and lowered her voice. You're smart. You know how to make things disappear. You could help me clean this up. Just make it look organized. Once the new funding hits, nobody will care. My stomach turned, not from shock, but from clarity. She didn't want help. She wanted cover. She wanted a witness with credibility. She wanted me to be the adult in the room so she could keep being reckless. I closed my laptop slowly and said, I can't partner with a business that can't separate company money from personal spending. Her eyes narrowed. So you're saying no? I'm saying I'm not attaching my name to this, I replied. Vanessa's voice rose just enough to make nearby people glance over. You're doing this to punish me. I stayed calm. I'm doing this to protect myself. She leaned back, arms crossed, and her face shifted into that familiar cruelty she used when she didn't get her way. Of course, she said, letting the sarcasm drip. The adopted one finally grew a spine. Cute. I felt my pulse stay steady. Then I stood up, picked up my bag, and looked down at her like she was a stranger I'd outgrown. You taught me I'm not family, I said, voice low. So don't ask me to carry your mess. Her mouth opened like she had 1,000 insults ready, but nothing came out. For a second, she just stared at me, blinking, like she couldn't understand why her usual buttons weren't working anymore. Then her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it and her face drained of color. She looked up at me, suddenly tense, suddenly scared. Wait, she said, softer now. Taryn, don't go. I just need you to listen. I paused for half a second, not because I cared, but because I wanted to see if she could say one honest sentence. She couldn't. Instead, she whispered, If this gets out, I'm done. I nodded once. Then you should have stopped before it got this far. And I walked out. Before I even reached my car, my phone lit up with a notification from Sasha. 3 words that made everything in Vanessa's world start to tilt. She's being sued. The lawsuit didn't arrive like a dramatic headline. It arrived the way real consequences show up in America. A certified letter, a court notice, and a lawyer's voicemail with a deadline. Vanessa tried to brush it off, calling it a vendor misunderstanding, but the dominoes started falling fast. 1 vendor became 2. Then clients backed out because her agency ran on trust and image, and both were cracking at the same time. A week after our Starbucks meeting, I got a voicemail from Jared, her boyfriend. His voice sounded tight and tired. He said Vanessa was panicking and my parents were about to get dragged into it. That was enough to make me drive to my parents' house that night. My mom opened the door already defensive, like I was the problem walking in. My dad sat in the living room staring at the floor. I didn't argue. I went straight to the point. You need to check your bank accounts tonight. My mom waved it off. Vanessa handles our finances. I kept my voice calm. That's exactly why you need to look. At the kitchen table, I had my mother log in herself. I didn't touch anything. I just watched the screen load and saw both of their faces change. Transfers they didn't recognize. Repeated payments routed to unfamiliar accounts. A loan inquiry notification they had never seen. My mom whispered that it couldn't be real. My dad asked how much. And when he saw the total, his shoulders dropped like something inside him finally broke. My mother cried quietly, not from guilt, but from shock. I told them what to do, step by step. Call the bank, freeze access, change every password, and meet with an attorney in the morning. The next day, they did exactly that. Vanessa showed up furious, screaming that everyone was betraying her, blaming me for turning them against her. My father demanded the passwords. She refused. That refusal became its own evidence. Within days, the vendor case expanded, and a forensic review was requested. Her payment processor froze funds. More clients canceled. Friends stopped answering. Then the car she loved so much disappeared from the driveway at sunrise. Repo doesn't look like revenge. It looks like a tow truck and a silent neighborhood. Vanessa tried calling me from new numbers, swinging between rage and begging. I didn't respond. A month later, liquidation notices went up. Her business assets were being sold to cover debts. I bought what I needed legally through the public sale, the same way anyone could, and used it to build something clean. When Vanessa found out, she screamed that I stole her life. My dad finally said the sentence she couldn't survive. "You stole from us," he told her, voice shaking. "And you're still playing the victim." After that, she had nowhere left to stand. Vanessa didn't end up with a cinematic courtroom speech or a neat little redemption arc. Real consequences don't need dramatic music. They just keep showing up every morning until a person runs out of places to hide. The first thing she lost was her audience. The friends who used to crowd around her at dinners and rooftop parties stopped answering. The group chats went quiet. People who once called her inspiring suddenly had meetings they couldn't miss. Even the ones who still cared kept their distance, because nobody wants to be close to a fire when the investigators show up. Then she lost her image. Without the agency, without the clients, without the fancy car and the constant busy schedule, she didn't know who to be. She tried to act like she was taking a break, like it was a choice. But you can only post motivational quotes for so long before reality catches up. When my parents finally cut off her access and the lawyer got involved, she moved back into their house, not as the star, as a problem that now lived in the guest room. I visited my parents more after that, not because everything was magically fixed, but because I refused to let them drown in shame alone. My mother looked older in a way that made me angry at the years she wasted defending Vanessa's cruelty. One evening, over coffee at their kitchen table, she said quietly, "We thought we were protecting the family. My dad didn't make excuses this time. He stared at his hands and admitted, 'We kept choosing peace over truth, and we made you pay for it.'" That was the first apology I'd ever heard that didn't come with a warning or a blame attached. Vanessa tried to talk to me once, cornering me in the hallway like we were teenagers again. Her voice shook as she said she didn't mean for it to go this far. She said she was under pressure. She said she was scared. I listened because I'm not heartless, but I didn't fold. I told her the truth. Pressure doesn't turn you into someone cruel. It just reveals who you already are. A week later, a handwritten letter showed up at my apartment. It wasn't a perfect apology. It was messy and defensive in places. But buried in the middle was one honest line. She wrote that she hated how easily I could survive without needing applause, and she hated herself for needing it so badly. I didn't write back. Not out of spite, out of self-respect. Some doors don't need to be reopened to prove you've healed. I focused on my work, on my peace, and on building a life that didn't require anyone's permission. I helped my parents set up their finances safely, taught them how to protect their accounts, and made sure they had boundaries that couldn't be bypassed by guilt. Vanessa took a part-time retail job a few weeks later. It was the first time she had to show up on someone else's schedule and earn money without a spotlight. She hated it. But it was real, and it was necessary. The lesson I took from all of it is simple, and I wish I'd learned it sooner. Being family isn't about blood or paperwork. It's about respect. If someone only treats you well when you're useful, that isn't love. It's control. And the strongest revenge isn't screaming or humiliating them back. It's refusing to be owned. It's building a life so solid that their opinions can't shake it. If you've ever been the one treated like an outsider, remember this. You don't have to beg for a seat at a table that keeps cutting you down. Sometimes the best gift you can give yourself is walking away, drawing a line, and letting the truth do what it always does eventually. It collects its price. Our team at the Revenge Argon channel is working hard to craft stories that are engaging, meaningful, and memorable. This is a fictional story created for entertainment and educational purposes, designed to share positive lessons and valuable takeaways with our viewers. Love how the main character stayed calm, set firm boundaries, and let the truth handle the consequences instead of losing control in the moment. She proved that the strongest revenge isn't shouting. It's protecting yourself and moving with quiet confidence. If you were in her shoes, What would you do? Pay the bill to keep the peace? Confront your sister on the spot? Or walk away and cut contact?